Before the counter starts, can I just say something? I'm the type of person who calls the elephant in the room. First of all, it's super scary to be here. And please give a huge round of applause for all the speakers today, because being there is just trembling, everybody looking at you, it's hard. The second point, I'm completely eating my time. The second point is, thank you so much, Joanna. I feel like I found my new future business partner. She laid a lot of the ground of what I think partially I'm going to be covering. So, as you see, my name is Anett. I've been living in Portugal for the last 7.5 years. The rest is not important because the topic that I'm going to address hopefully is. It's new for me. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And I took Sarah's challenge and, hey, do you want to go and talk about this? And I said, sure, because I think it's important. And somewhere we got to start this conversation. And I don't imagine a better place than this. So, that being said, text me when you get home. Has anybody ever heard this from their friends, family members? Okay. So this is where the statistic starts. I don't know about you, but I've heard this way too many times in my life, but it was only recently while I was listening to a true crime podcast about femicide, just to make it very specific, when I started thinking, girls and women, we've been hardwired since the beginning to be careful, don't go out late at night. If you go out, make sure you're with someone, you don't walk on dark streets, all those things. And we learned that that's the way of being. And it was only, like I said, now that I started challenging why that is. The second point is, what if the technology that we use to send that SMS or call the person that we want to tell that we're safe, what if that same technology is used to create us harm? Now, statistics say that 1 in 3 women will experience gender-based violence in their lifetime. And the Economist Intelligence Unit's report from 2021 announced that 85% of women have witnessed online violence, out of which 38% are going to experience this harm themselves. Another aspect we need to look at, and it's very relevant, especially for where we are right now with the AI, is that 90 to 95% of the deep fakes that are existing out there are of sexual content and depict women. And we haven't even went here in these statistics with more specific problems, which has to do with the harm that women, black women, women in religious communities, disabled women are suffering. Violence towards women is one of the most persistent and still under-addressed humanitarian crises. Framing the problem. So what are we talking about here? The move fast and break things ethos that most technology companies are using rarely prioritizes risk, or rarely even look at risk. And while we're very much focused on thinking about how AI is going to impact our life, whether we're going to be left without a job because everything is automated, we overlook the fact that the harm is already done, that a lot of these AI technologies have been existing for a couple of years. They just haven't surfaced, or we haven't focused about how that looks like in terms of harm. So before actually going forward and getting into how technology looks like and how tech is used to enable harm, I think we need to talk about a common language, and that is, what is violence? Violence basically is inflicting power and inflicting harm, whether that's psychological, emotional, or structural. Violence has been used for centuries to overpower people, to create fear, to create oppression, and ultimately to reduce our liberty to be able to be ourselves or to do what we want to. So let's. Sorry about that. What is tech-facilitated violence? It's a very specific subgroup, let's say, or undergroup of violence in general, where any type of technology, whether that's devices, platforms, any kind of digital tools, are directed at women to cause harm. Oops, seems like mine is not so fast today. So let's see how the threat landscape looks like. Now, we already saw a little bit of the security talk at the beginning. And in security, you cannot actually talk about risk without having a look at how the threat landscape looks like and what is that actually is going to be exploited. We're going to talk about 4 categories, major bulks of how harm is manifests in our lives. And one is stalking, surveillance, and monitoring. This is probably the category that's, let's say, easiest to enable because it requires the attacker or the perpetrator, however we want to call it, to have access the device of the person. And what this means is installing spyware, stalkerware on someone's device. These applications will allow that particular person access to our information on their device, of our whereabouts, even the capability of recording and hearing the conversations that we might be having with someone if we go out. The other point is tracking devices. There's a lot of mini gadgets that are very small to hide. It's very easy to put in someone's bag, someone's backpack, someone's car, someone's coat. And that allows an attacker to always have an awareness of where their victim is. Now, probably some of you might already know this. The AirTag, very useful to find the stuff that we keep losing, but that's actually a very good use case of how at the beginning it was misused. And it was used by attackers to be able to pursue their victims. Obviously, that some updates from behalf of Apple made that situation go away, but it's just one example of how something that should be easy, should facilitate our lives, end up being weaponized. Last but not least, facial recognition technology, very useful for police work, but this can also be used by someone with malicious intent. Take a picture of someone from social media, run it through the program, and be able to identify who that person is, and then do the rest that they want to do. Now, the second point is non-consensual, intimate, image-based abuse. Sounds a bit wordy to say, but this means basically using those intimate images, whether they're actual images that were taken, maybe they were photoshopped, but obviously the biggest concern that we have nowadays is the synthetic media that we can very easily produce with AI. So what that looks like. Images can depict sexually explicit scenes. It can be an image, it can be a video, and again, it's not us, it's something created, but it still feels very real for the victim. What this leads to is sextortion, when individuals will use this outcome, let's say, of their process, of their creation, to blackmail someone. And to be fair, we've seen this not only on one-to-one side, but quite on a large scale a couple of years ago within the cybersecurity space. Notification apps, and if you've watched the media, there's been actually some changes on the European landscape. What it means blocking these, or hopefully banning these organizations from allowing the existence of such apps, and that will definitely be a step forward. And the last 2 things, upskirting and voyeurism. This is where we don't need AI to create images for us. This is where all those small devices can be either hacked, and imagine your baby cam will record an images of you maybe changing, or upskirting is when someone is taking a picture under the skirt. And then what happens, these images are shared on very specific platforms, and I think you can imagine what happens further and how people will interact with that kind of content. Last but not least, cyber flashing. I didn't want to make this a bit funny to put a little eggplant on it, but I think we know what that means. In this case, it's sharing of intimate images of the perpetrator. I have to say, I was not in any of our dating apps, so I got lucky. I did not get to be cyber flashed by anybody. Okay, the next step, and this is where we're starting to get a little bit more, let's say, aggressive into how this harm looks like, sexual gender-based harassment. And this is where fake accounts come in. This is where already behavior is behind what's happening. They're individuals with a specific mindset, with a specific intent, and they're going to be very aggressive when it comes to targeting their audience. This is where abuse and a lot of the online harassment comes in. And to focus maybe on one of them, doxing is actually when someone publishes or threatens to publish personal information of an individual instigating those who they publish to pursue that individual. And some of you who are in the gaming world, I'm not. There has been cases in the past where on forums, female accounts have been hacked, information made available, and then the perpetrator was instigating others to go and actually harass her, which is, I don't know why you would do that. It's terrible, but unfortunately, it is what it is. The last couple of things, especially mass pylons, has to do with how social media platforms, or what social media platforms actually allow to happen, how you can have all these sock puppet accounts or bots mass targeting one specific person. Last but not least, information device and control apps. This is a mix of things, and there are really two categories here. One is the day-to-day apps, whether they're cloud apps, maybe our shared home devices, family accounts, and all those. They can be misused by individuals. And imagine that your thermostat keeps going crazy and crazy, or alarm rings. It can be someone who hacked your system and just wants to inflict a lot of harm and distress on you. And the last point I want to put here, the targeted attacks, hacking accounts. There are people, organizations who would specifically target services aimed at women to get their information and use that further in harassment cases. The common ground on all of these is the intent, and what all these mechanisms are looking to do is coercive control, especially when we're looking at stalking and surveillance. Generally control and punishment to fuel harassment, to silence people, and again, isolate and more control. One thing I do want to call out here, especially for the last two categories, is women who tend to speak out and who are activists, whether we're talking about lawyers politicians as well, or journalists. Oftentimes, they're going to be the ones who are going to suffer more of these harms. And the intent is very, very clear, to make an example of those women, to show others that if you speak up, this is what's going to happen. Okay, so we have not fixed how to properly address all those threats that we will be talking about, but we do have to look at what's coming next and what is on the threat landscape. So there are two concerns, and yes, no surprise there, they're very much AI related. One element that we already seen today mentioned in the first talk is AI enables a lot of the attacks to be at scale, to be very accessible, and is accessible for all types of attackers to just take the code, write it, and it just does all by itself. The other issue is that the outcomes, the outputs of these AI agents tend to be even more and more realistic, which is going to give me a lot of work as a security awareness professional. But there's speed and persistence. So there's all that bit that now it was done, or it was being a pattern, but now because of the AI, it's going to be even more persistent. The other part we have to look at, and this is where I think the design of products comes in, is AI has certain use cases that maybe sound good as an idea, but if we don't look further at how that can scale certain behaviors, we're going to have an even bigger problem. And just to mention one or two cases, is the AI partners, AI girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it might be called. The theory behind it is it can be a cure for loneliness. Maybe it can help some people to get better skills in dating. Unfortunately, if there's no guardrails in how that agent or how that girlfriend is going to respond, that will only reinforce negative behaviors. Again, we're talking about those who already would have tendency of being maybe more violent or aggressive towards women. But because the way they're built, the end result is going to be something very hypersexualized. No one's going to be 40 and above. I'm saying about myself, I'm already there. And they're going to be very compliant and just boundary-free. And what we risk here is objectification at scale and just normalizing abusive behaviors. Now, the root cause, I'm just looking at my time here, the root cause of all these issues, as Joanna already mentioned, it is a behavior thing. And what we need to take away from is our identity is composed of our cultural norms, the learned behaviors, the pre-existing biases, and ultimately, we all just want to belong somewhere. Now, a good technology is going to be built based on knowing what our weaknesses are, how we're configured, which means creating products that are engaging, products that are going to give us what we need, and they're going to reinforce our biases. And that's where the sensitive loop comes in, where the more we see of the content that we believe, the more that reinforces those negative behaviors, and it's going to end up changing the thing. If you think that something is green and someone always tells you it's green, you're going to end up believing it is, even if it's a completely different color. Probably a very bad example, but I think you understand it. So solutions and enablers, this is a very difficult topic, and there are, I'm just going to focus on a couple of them, of what can enable us to solve the situation and what can block us. I think at the fundamental issue of all this is that most of these platforms and tools are built for engagement and not for safety. And ask any security person, they will say that business has to run. Security lags behind if it's not a blocker. And that's going to be one of the reasons why we won't have products with by default are designed to be safe. Low accountability. Still, there's few countries where certain things are criminalized, or how much like gigantic tech organizations can be held responsible for what they've created. Detection and prevention, I think we all know we're lagging a bit behind that as well. And last but not least, there's parts on the legal system where people still haven't agreed, even on proper definitions. And one of the things that for me is most concerning when it comes to image-based sexual abuse is that not all recognize that even if it's a deep fake, like that's a real case to go after in court. Whereas even if it's a fake image, our brains will probably not understand that it's not you naked in that picture. But it's going to be just a figment of someone's imagination. And that's where if we don't look at the victim's lived experiences, we end up missing and not designing right products. Okay, not sure I'm going to cover this in 4 minutes, but let's go ahead. So as a security person, I love frameworks. And what I try to do while reading through the literature, and we're trying to understand how big this problem is, I did my own little version of a layered control. And yes, this is NIST-based as well. You saw at the beginning. So how does the system look like? It starts with defining and governing, understanding what the problem is, making sure that we have prevention systems in place. If the harm is already produced, we know how to spot those incidents, those situations, take action as fast as possible, and then restore. Now, just quickly, when we talk about defining what the problem is recognizing this is a systemic risk, the technology-enabled harm towards women, make sure that we standardize the legal approach. When we're talking about prevention, that's where secure by design comes in, and other more security-related elements like identity or authentication, or how do we actually manage the security controls around access to these platforms. Spotting means we can recognize patterns, and we know how those arrive, so we can know when is it that we will have to intervene. And this is where, for example, cross-platform monitoring is very important, especially if Facebook and Instagram is a very good example. Two different tools, the same company, there's a possibility there. If there's a pattern on one side, you can cut the issue from the root. Act. One of the things that unfortunately still fall between the cracks is how fast someone can apply to get help, and how fast, for example, those images are removed from the internet. Luckily, there's been progress in that as well. And if you heard about the Take It Down US Act, that's actually one pretty good example of something that they managed to do. And last but not quite last but not least, restore. Even if we manage to do all these other layers, it is essential that we focus on the victim, because at the end of the day, it's their lives that is being completely impacted. And many times what still happens is there's not enough support, whether that's legal, whether that's technical support. And there's the psychological element of it, where the harms are so wide. It's not just the emotional and mental health issues that victims can have from depression, anxiety, but it's the socioeconomical ones where women lose out on opportunities to progress their career because there's already a reputational damage. So all of them, though, all of these layers do depend on the last layer, which is the human layer, obviously my favorite. And why is that? Because this is such a systemic issue. We need to make sure that we're trying as much as possible to change the mindset of the individuals, of the perpetrators, make them understand that we're different, but it doesn't mean that we need to disregard someone just because of their gender. We need to make sure that organizations understand why it is important to start thinking about the risk before. And there's something I read recently which made so much sense. If you designed a product and since the beginning you did not think about how that could be misused, you already failed. And last but not least, awareness has to do with the victims. And a lot of those harms that we saw in the previous slide could have been prevented if women would have a better digital literacy. They would understand what applications could do or how they could secure even their mobile devices. This is probably a slide that, there we go. This is probably a slide that you will like, because this is the takeaway part, and my time is up. Can I still have 1 minute to finish? Thank you. This is the slide that is a bit more technical, and depending on what you do on your day-to-day job, hopefully this gives you a little bit of direction. These are the practical things that we can do. First, on the content generation control side, making sure that if possible, we're going to stop a particular agent to producing something that is harmful. And the very bad and tough example that I'm going to give you is producing any sexual images of children, because we've talked about women, but ultimately what we're talking about here as a problem, it's way bigger than it is. Input filtering, output validation. No, and this is again the security layered approach. Even if you stop it from the beginning, you still need to make sure that you check what are people inputting, what's the prompt that they're giving, and what exactly is being outputted. And that's where, again, it's AI, it's new. We shouldn't trust completely that it's going to give what we want it to do. Very important element, build test cases into your design process. Make sure that you know what it's supposed to be doing, but you do double check and see what the intention is. Distribution and amplification, this is where we can configure platforms to not amplify the harm, rate limiting, deploy classifiers so we know that an image that's posted is fake. We know it's AI and it's not real. And then the last bit is reporting, making sure that the platforms and the tech and whatever it might be in scope, it's created in such a way that it's easy for people to use and easy to get help. And I'm going to jump. There's some good examples like Bumble and TikTok that all managed to do some upgrades in this space. And I think AI image blurring is especially useful when we talk about that cyber flashing and we don't want to see what we didn't ask for. And just my closing. I think this is a very hard topic, and obviously it didn't fit in 20 minutes. But for me, this is the beginning of the conversation, because there's a lot to be done. Like I said, this is not just about women. This is a people issue. And if I'm doing this right, I know there's a lot of slides and there's a lot of text, but if I'm going to do this right, hopefully not, but I might end up being part of the statistics. But I do hope that together we still have the possibility to take action, to change something, and maybe in a little bit of time, none of us or your sons, daughters will need to ask the question whether they've got home safe at night. Thank you.